Do you ever feel like you're carrying the emotional weight for everyone around you? What happens when one person is shouldering it all? And how can we shift that for the better? One of my clients is married to a physician. In the session that we had the other day, some really important relational things were demonstrated or came up in that session. She's also the mother of several children, and any of you that are physicians or that are married to a physician, have been through the process of medical school and training, know that one of the frequent casualties of that kind of rigorous training is that the person going through the schooling and the residency and the training becomes so consumed out of necessity that frequently he or she is really taken out of most of the everyday functioning and logistics of the family. So what ends up happening with the parent that is still at home is that they end up carrying the majority of the load for the day-to-day logistics and the emotional climate of the situation. And then frequently, when training ends and the physician gets into his or her normal job and even hypothetically could have or does have more bandwidth to be engaged, the system that has been set up is one that relies really heavily on the person, the wife in this case. And so one of the things that she was sharing is that she feels like the emotional load for her family lies squarely on her shoulders, and that all of her children are used to turning toward her. And so when they become disorganized emotionally, when they're struggling with a friend, or when they're having a problem at school or at sports, their default is to look to their mom for help and support. And there's a really important variable that's an actual physical, I guess it's not a physical thing, an actual entity in a family, in a system, in a relationship, and that is the emotional support. There is a weight that comes with that emotional support. You've all experienced that, right? When you're dealing with something challenging, there's a weight that comes with that, and it's really nice when you have somebody helping you carry that weight. Well, ideally, in a partnership, both partners are equally yoked and partnering and carrying that emotional weight. And when that gets imbalanced and one person is carrying most of the weight, it becomes a really heavy load. And so we were exploring this dynamic and how to start changing that a little bit, because for all of them, including my client, the whole system was used to her being the responsible one. And so then, if dad's putting the kids to bed, then oftentimes the mom, the wife, still, when she comes home, would still have to make sure that everything was settled. A lot of times the kids wouldn't want to go to bed unless mom was there to put them down. Or, if there are decisions to be made about sporting events or those kinds of things. One thing is logistics, right? And when you've got one parent that's staying at home and one that is primarily responsible for work and providing, there's a lot of logistical stuff that it makes very much sense for the stay-at-home person to be taken care of. The emotional weight is another variable entirely, and that needs to be one that is shared. And what we're really getting at is attachment, because what she was feeling and what she was providing was she was the primary attachment figure. She was the primary secure base for the entire system. And that's a heavy load. And in a partnership, you need somebody who is willing to carry that emotional load with you, so that the weight of that can be dispersed, and so that the needs of the people in the system can more effectively be met, because you get a synergistic dynamic that occurs when there are more people sharing that load. So if this doesn't get fixed, there are two predictable casualties, actually three predictable casualties that happen. One is the person that's carrying this load frequently gets burned out because it's a heavy load, and it's not a load that's designed for one person to be carrying alone. The second casualty of that is the other partner, because we all want to feel needed. We all want to feel valued. And so even if I've got somebody else that's carrying some of my emotional weight, it undermines my feeling looked to. I know as a dad myself, it kind of hurts my feelings if one of my kids is struggling and they don't feel comfortable coming to me. There have been many times over the years where, where one of our kids has gone to my wife, which I totally want them going there because she's a great secure base and responds with sensitivity and availability most of the time. And I want that, but part of me is also like, well, why didn't she talk to me? Or did she not trust me that I would care or that I would be there? Did he not feel like he had access to me? But that's kind of where my brain will go sometimes. Most of the time, thankfully, with my kids, they come to both of us pretty evenly and seek our support pretty evenly. But when that doesn't happen, the partner that is not carrying their portion of the emotional weight also can end up feeling a little devalued, a little less important than the other one. And the third casualty are the kids, because it is easier when you have more secure bases. In fact, one of the most protective factors that the research has identified, the more caring adults an adolescent has in their lives, the better the outcomes are for the adolescent. And while not everybody can function as a secure base, there are lots of different people who can function as support and part of our support network in our lives. And if one person is trying to carry all of the emotional weight for a whole family, oftentimes there will be moments, or there will be kids who maybe aren't as proactive in getting their needs met, or who don't scream as loudly as other kids or whatever, maybe really struggling with something that they feel uncomfortable going to. And some of those needs can kind of fly under the radar and end up being unmet when there's an imbalance in this process in a relationship. So the advice that I gave her was to talk to her husband about this, to even, address it with her kids, and just to let him know, because most people don't think about this emotional support variable as like an actual thing. And most people aren't even aware of this dynamic that's going on. It's just like, well, yeah, I told the girls to go to bed, or whatever, they didn't go to bed, or whatever. Joe went and talked to you. I'm really glad that he did. Most people aren't really aware of the actual importance of this variable. And then when you've got a system like this with a physician, this also happens in the military, happens very predictably with deployment. When somebody is deployed and removed from the system has to keep going, right? And whoever's not deployed has to keep trying to meet all of the emotional needs of the children that are still at home. And then all of a sudden the soldier comes back and re-enters that system, and nobody's used to him or her being in the middle of things. And so sometimes when a soldier comes back and tries to parent, even tries to kind of help with this emotional aspect, the kids can be like, well, who are you to be telling me what to do? This is mom's domain. And sometimes the mom or the parent that has been kind of holding down the fort can also think like, it can feel like you're kind of encroaching on their domain, and the system has to readjust. And so you first have to know what healthy looks like, and then you have to practice doing the new healthy behavior long enough in order for the system to readjust and to shift the unhealthy rules and to make them healthy again. And so you've got to talk to one another about it. If you're the person who feels like you're carrying more than your share of the emotional load in your family, let your partner know that you're feeling like that. And otherwise, you'll end up just kind of talking about making little passive-aggressive comments or even just holding resentment. But talk to your partner about how this is feeling. And these are the words that you can use. Hey, I feel like I'm carrying more of the emotional weight in our family. I feel like everybody is depending emotionally on me. And everybody comes to me when they're in need, when they're needing support or they're needing help or guidance emotionally. And sometimes that feels like a heavy load. And I understand totally how this got set up. And I'm so glad for all of the work that you do. And I really could use you to help me carry some of this weight. And then you can, when a kid comes to you, you can intentionally involve the other parent. You can also talk to the other parent about doing things to, maybe help put the kids to bed. So 2 things that I would invite you to do. 1, send me your questions in the comments, DM me or send me questions that you have. I'm happy to answer the questions and to give you tools and information that will be helpful. The second thing is that this really ties into one of our 7 healthy and happy principles that are designed to make and help you thrive in your life and relationships. And this ties into 2 of them. It ties into resource management, how an individual, a couple and a family are all able to effectively manage the stresses and the strains and the balance between stressors and resources, and then also attachment and how to get your emotional needs met and how to effectively meet the emotional needs of somebody else. We've got tons of resources in our Healthy and Happy University that help with these as well as many other variables.